Welcome, Suzanne. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Where in the world are you tuning in from?
I am in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada.
Fantastic. Vancouver, beautiful, sunny until it isn't, and then it's raining all the time. So it's a little bit of everything.
Yep, we have all-
Um, Yeah. I know that you have a fantastic story and you are working with multiple people in the grief space. So I want to hear, where did this all begin? What brought you to where you are working now?
So this all began for me really with the death of my son, Ben. He was 22 when he died in September of 2020. And that loss, even though it wasn't my first loss of someone close to me, my dad died when I was in my early 30s and my mom when I was in my mid 40s. So I had experienced the death of someone close to me that died far sooner than I wanted. And there is something about the death of a child, that out of order death, that is just never going to make sense to us. So that's really where I ended up going down this path of grief education, mostly starting for myself because I didn't know enough about it to be able to do it in a way that felt healthy and like I'm going to go back so you can edit it out if you want, or you can leave the sneeze in. Anyway, I didn't know enough about grief to be able to do it in a way that felt healthy and survivable for me. So it really started when I started having symptoms and things happening that I didn't understand and I didn't know were normal and therefore were terrifying. And
Mm.
that's really where it started for me, was having to figure out, how does the world even work when your child has died?
Yes, truly, Suzanne, I'm so sorry for your loss and losses. Truly, you have gone through so much when it comes to grief. And, I really love how you took your experience and you said, okay, how do I find my way through this while simultaneously, helping other people through this? It sounds like you really kind of created community in a space where things were so dire and awful. I truly I am sorry for your loss. How many years has it been?
We just passed the fourth anniversary, so it's been 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would it be appropriate for me to ask how he passed away?
Yeah, Ben died of depression and anxiety. So he had struggled with depression and anxiety for many years. And unfortunately, for some people, that's a disease that's terminal. And that's what happened for him. So, yeah, it was very, very, it will always be tragic.
Truly. That is absolutely very tragic. Tell me a little bit about that time and that space for you, when you were just kind of finding out about this, these awful things are happening around you, and then you decided to sort of make a shift. Where did that come from and what really was happening for you in that moment?
It's such an interesting question because I think really, you know, I without the formal training that I now have, became a grief educator almost from the beginning because I knew for my own sanity, I had to get the spin out of my head. And anyone who has experienced a loss that catastrophic and sudden and disruptive in your life knows that those very earliest days your brain is just spinning all the time and your body doesn't work right and like nothing is as it should be. And I really, for my own mental health, started writing, and I would write just what was happening for me that day, what I was learning about grief, like how terrible it was. It just the truth. And so I shared it, as you do, on Facebook just with friends and family, and the response I got was so amazing because for so many people, they didn't have anybody in their life that was talking about grief and that was sharing what was happening for them and that was being honest about how terrible it is and also about how you still need to keep living. Like it's this terrible, awful, horrifying experience. And I knew immediately that the story society tells us about grieving parents, which is a version of they never recover and they just curl up in a ball and that's the end. That was not going to be my story. I was very sure that that was not going to be my story. But what happens in your life when you decide that what society tells you is normal is not going to be your story is you have to make your own story. So much of my journey was about, well, if not that, then what? So if I'm not going to do this quietly and I'm not going to deny what's happening to me, well, then what? Well, then it became about, I was writing to just get the swirl out of my head, and people would write back and, comment on my posts and say, oh my gosh, I understand this so much better now, or thank you so much for sharing. I really get it. Or, oh, I can see that my friend, that's exactly what's happening for her, but she's not talking about it. What should I do? And so it really became, I really did, it was not a magnanimous, generous, gesture at all. It really was for my own survival, because I could not make sense of the world without writing about it and getting that thought swirl out of my head, and then getting feedback where people said, oh, that makes perfect sense to me, or, oh, I never thought about it that way before, or, oh, have you tried this? Even, and people didn't give a lot of suggestions. I didn't get a lot of unsolicited advice. I was very grateful, because for a lot of grievers, that's their experience. They get unending, unsolicited advice, which is not helpful. I didn't get a lot of that, but I got a lot of really genuine connection. And that's what was so interesting, was that it became really clear that this was a topic that people actually wanted to talk about, but they didn't have permission to talk about it. And they didn't have the confidence to feel like they could talk about it without doing harm, which I think is where most of us get tangled. We get scared because we don't know enough. And then we don't want to hurt anybody or make it worse. So we don't say anything or do anything. And then time passes, and then it gets more awkward to say or do something. And then we're just all in this mixed up bubble of not being able to support each other. And we're ending up isolated when what we really need is connection. So for me, that's where it started, was just writing for my own mental health, getting comments on Facebook. And then I thought, I'm really onto something here. And I was connecting more with griever forums and different spaces where grievers gathered, because this all, of course, happened in the time of the pandemic, where we were all, mostly staying at home and had limited physical contact with people. But that had opened up for many of us a really rich online life. And so I was finding those online forums where people were talking and just really listening to the conversation, listening to what people were writing about and seeing what people were saying, and realizing how much grievers were having to self-educate for their own survival the same way that I was, and that the people who wanted to support them didn't know how. And the common thread of all of those conversations that struck me in those early days was this idea that grief changes your address book. And that's really what has brought me down this whole path, was this idea that grief changes your address book. And it had happened to me. And I knew it happened to tons of other grievers because everybody was talking about it. And I knew that nobody wanted that. Right? The people in my life who I was really close, I thought I was really close friends with, that disappeared, that's not what they wanted. So what was it that made that normal, that made that typical? And
Okay.
how could I somehow help change that?
Beautiful. Interesting. Okay, there's a lot happening here. So I'm hearing two things. One, I'm really seeing that you went through kind of the keys to resiliency really quickly. Like you found community. You turned your pain to power. You did these things really soon in the beginning, which really speaks to your ability to go through horrendous things, all while all while trying to find the silver lining. That
Mm,
that is that's really very beautiful, and I really want to commend you for that, because um these experiences that we go through, you often hear of someone who, a couple of years down the road, they
mhm.
start to kind of transmute and alchemize their experience. Whereas with you, it became your lifeline without even realizing it. You went straight into all of the steps that people take to get out of, not out, because there's no such thing as out when it comes to grief, pain, catastrophe, these types of things, but to alchemize, to take the situation and turn a phrase. And you did that really quickly. So, really well done there. It really speaks to you and your character. And then the second thing that I'm really noticing too is that you have a beautiful ability, I think, let me know if I'm correct, of giving people the benefit of the doubt. Because you hear that a lot in the cancer world too. I'm a cancer survivor. It changes your address book. People disappeared and you have a lot of anger. But for you, I'm hearing that rather than anger, you went to these wonderful people want to be there for me, but they just don't know how. And
Mhm.
so again, another fantastic quality that you should be really proud of is that that in this moment, I feel like you gave people the benefit of the doubt. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. And I think what's so interesting about what you're saying is it's a both and, right? I could be incredibly frustrated and sad and angry. And now I'm grieving that I've also lost a whole bunch of people I thought I was close to,
Hmm.
and be really curious about why that happened. And why does that keep happening? Like, why is that something that grievers on forums are talking about? Because it's that normal.
Mm.
So it's like, yes, how it's the both and of it all. And it's the same with, really turning to the alchemy piece was like, yes, and I don't want anyone who's listening to this who's in that earliest acute phase to feel like there's any supposed to in this conversation, because there's no supposed to. You're not supposed to alchemize it into this, big magnanimous thing you're doing for humanity. That's not the expectation. And while you're curled up in a ball on the sofa and you're so tired you can barely move, you can hold space for curiosity.
Mm.
And that's what happened for me. I had this understanding that the path for me, as a matter of survival, because one option was curl up in a ball and die, and I wasn't doing that. So then what? And the thing that became clear to me was that the path was about being conscious and curious. And that has been the lens that has, been my sort of North Star for all of it. And conscious was about allowing all of the emotions, from the good list and the bad list and all the lists, all of them, to be acceptable, denying none, shutting down to none, going asleep to none, letting them all, feeling the horror, feeling the panic, feeling the dismay, feeling the despair, the despondency, all of it, the gratitude, the joy, the love, all of it in a big tangled mass of goo. That's
Hmm.
conscious. And the curious was about, and then what? And really, the
Mm.
curious started from a spot where I was sobbing so hard that I couldn't breathe. We've all done that ugly cry where you're just gasping, you're making that awful whooping sound to try and breathe.
Yeah.
And what tool did I have in my toolbox that dealt with that? Because that wasn't going to be a long-term solution. So, what did I know? What could I do that helped with that? How do I figure that out? Okay, I figured that out. I remembered an interview I'd heard had that talked all about the stress cycle and how when you're crying so hard, how you change what you're thinking about, and use that tool for years. I will use it forever. And then what? And then what? And then what? And what about this address book thing? And what about, like, why are we so scared? And why aren't we talking? And what about? And what about? And that little piece of curiosity, I think, also keeps us from getting stuck, because people are so scared to get stuck in their grief, to allow it. And they feel like if they allow it, they'll get stuck. And the allowing it is actually what allows us to not get stuck. And if we can allow it and hold a tiny bit of curiosity about what the next tiny step might be, then we can alchemize all of what we're carrying, that we will carry forever, into a different life. We can rebuild and reimagine and recalibrate and I mean, I had to build a whole new me because I knew the person I was before I got that middle of the night phone call didn't exist anymore. I was 100% clear on that too. So if not her, then who? Like so much curiosity at the same time as sobbing in a ball on the couch and zoning out to Netflix because I just couldn't think anymore. But it can,
Right.
that's the both and of grief. It's a both and, all of it, all the time. It's a both and. And I think we lose the thread of being able to, and again, it's not a should, it's not a must. I don't think things happen for a reason. I think things happen and then we get to choose how to respond. But we're making
Wow.
choices all the time. We're making little choices all day, every day. And we're doing that in grief too. So am I choosing the next thing that's going to allow me to move a tiny bit and rebuild a tiny bit and imagine a tiny bit what might be possible when nothing makes sense at all?
Mhm. Wow. I'm feverishly writing notes because that's just beautiful. And I really love to dial back when you said you don't have to have the pressure on yourself to do some magnanimous thing. I think that that's really important too because we live in a world of kind of social medias where everyone's turning their pain to power, and even just this presence of this podcast, which is really a pain to power podcast, can also encourage this need to, get cancer and then become a famous pianist or
Yeah.
whatever it is. And none of those things are necessary. It can be whatever version of your joy fits for you, and if, and I love how you say, you know, maybe not famous pianist, but getting off the couch and not ugly crying every day. That could be the goal, and that's beautiful. And that's more than enough. Would you
Or
agree
only
with that?
part of the day.
There you go.
Part of
Exactly.
we have to be functional. But
Right.
knowing that ugly crying is okay too.
Also beautiful.
You can be ugly crying and functional at the same time too. I did a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, yes, and both and.
Both and if we can hold that, which we're so uncomfortable with in Western culture, but if we can hold that, then really anything becomes possible. And I'm with you. It's not necessarily about becoming a grief educator and speaking on podcasts and going to speak to organizations and training people and teaching about grief. And that's not, if that's my path. That's not
Yeah,
everybody.
that's your path.
That's my path. But you have a path
Mm.
and you get to find it.
Yes.
And it's one
Mm.
breath, one baby step, one little choice.
Mhm.
Eventually, that little bit of movement turns into a path. And who knows where it leads? I don't know. Everyone's
Yeah.
is going to be different.
Mm. Yeah. Ugh, I just love that. I feel like we could write like a whole speech about this. Um, Beautiful. Okay, so then, Suzanne, am I understanding that when you say you're a grief educator, you are educating, is it that you're educating the griever, or is it that you are educating the supporters of the griever?
Yeah, I am mostly educating the supporters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, that's interesting. I was saying that right now it's about 50-50. Um, so because this path for me started with the curiosity about why it changes our address book,
Hmm.
really led me down the path of looking at what is happening for the supporters because the grievers are figuring it out to survive, right? So they're finding forums, they're finding books, they're finding podcasts, they're finding spaces, they're finding one person they can talk to. They're having to figure it out because they're in it. The
Hmm.
survivors have an optional experience,
Hmm.
right? Because they can just disengage. So, how do we help them? And I know that that's not what most of them want. Most of them don't want to go, ooh, scary, I'm out.
Right.
That's not what they want. They want to go, oh, huh, awkward. Gonna have to try some new skills here. I think I know a little bit. I'm gonna try. Right. So, how do we invite the supporters
Mhm.
to understand grief better, which helps to release a whole bunch of the judgment that we're conditioned to have about it, right? Because even if we have never grieved a big loss in our entire life, man, do we know exactly how you should be doing it? And we have no hesitation to tell you. It's the most ridiculous, right?
Right.
So But when we understand, for example, that the symptoms are really real, that they're physiological, scientists have studied them, we have functional MRIs that tell us why our brain fog is happening, it's a real thing. No one is faking, no one is making it up, all of that. It helps release the judgment that we might be feeling because then we go, oh, okay, so if this is a real thing, then I look at my friend, my colleague, my coworker, my student differently because what they're experiencing is real and normal. I just didn't know that. So now that I know, what would I do? Right now that I have some sense that what we say and what we do, the way we do those two things is backwards. And what we say needs to be open hearted. And what we do needs to be a very specific offer instead of saying something that closes the conversation down and offering, just call me anytime you need anything. Now
Mm.
that I know that, now what do I do differently? And then how does that impact the ability to build connection with the griever instead of isolation? Because ultimately, right now, we're all ending up isolated. The griever is isolated because the address book is empty for a gap, right? There's a gap where everyone has just vaporized before you start to replace all your people. So your address book is currently empty. You are all by yourself. That's the lived experience, right? We feel all by ourselves. Hopefully, you have found one person, two people, three people that you can talk to honestly about what's really happening. For many people, they don't have that. So you're all by yourself and you're having to learn what's happening to you because nobody told you what was coming. And the supporters are all by themselves because they're scared of doing harm and they don't want to say and do the wrong thing. So they end up not doing anything. And then time passes and it gets more awkward to say or do something. And then the opportunity feels like it's gone. So, how do we change that supporter experience so that they're opting in more often than they're opting out? So, that's why I spend so much time talking to supporters and workplaces and organizations and on podcasts, about how we really can shift that culture. And then for grievers, they really need community. They need
Mm.
safe spaces where they can just talk honestly about what's really true for them. So that's really become what my work with grievers is about, either in groups or individually one-on-one, or I'm doing an amazing collaboration right now with a writing coach. So we're doing a writing program, a 6-week writing program with grievers where it's just been really magical. And everyone in the room is grieving something different. The losses are all different, some really current, some really long ago, but they're still navigating. And we get together and we have a theme of the week and we talk about the theme and then we do free writing and then we share our writing. And it's just any way we can create safe spaces with a little bit of support, right? And some guidelines for people to be able to come together and share what's true for them shifts the dynamic. Because
Mm.
when you hear someone else talking about how their experience is similar to yours, you instantly feel less alone. We know that from every other aspect of our life. But we don't do it in grief because we're too scared. And we break down fear with education.
Wow. Love that saying. Break down fear with education. Suzanne, amazing. Okay, well, all right. So I'm curious, can we run through maybe some of your top tips for grievers, followed by some of your top tips for the supporters themselves? And I want to focus more on the supporters, but just maybe like a brief overview of some of your favorite things for grievers, and then following on the supporters themselves, who are probably the ones listening to this podcast.
Right. Going, oh no, I'm so
Yeah, how do I help XYZ who was just diagnosed? Or, the person who, the mom who lost their son, or whatever it is, and they're kind of deer in the headlights. And I'm sure that even you at times, and I know certainly me at times, even with our stories, can
Mhm.
still kind of go, oh
Mhm.
gosh, what do I do? So some tools in both would be amazing if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, of course. So for the grievers, I think the most important starting point is about permission.
Mm.
And I think there's a huge issue that we don't have permission from our culture, from our society to grieve. And so we have to give it to ourselves. I will continue to do everything I can to shift the culture so we have permission from the culture. And in the meantime, we need to give it to ourselves. And if we can give it to ourselves and allow it to be okay just within ourselves to feel all the feelings, to have all the mess, to have all of the yuck, and know that nothing is permanent. Everything is shifting and flowing and ebbing and all the things all the time. And we can, one breath and one small decision and one choice at a time, find a path. But if you can start with that permission piece, that's huge because we just don't get it. You know, people expect us to be done. They want it to be quiet and private, and they don't want to hear about it because they're terrified. That doesn't help us because we need community. We need our grief to be witnessed. That's the one universal, is that grief needs witnessing. So the other thing you need to do is find one person who you can trust to be your witness. And if you can find more than one, amazing. Keep looking. But there
Yeah.
are people out there who have the capacity already. And with open-hearted communication, with honesty on both sides about how awkward and messy and how none of us really know what we're doing, but we're going to figure it out together, we can find those witnesses. And that makes a huge difference to have that one or two or three people that you can tell what's really happening, because the rest of the time you're bombarded by people saying, how are you? Fine. Like, we don't even stop in the hallway anymore. We say, how are you? Fine. It's not a real conversation. People want to ask me at the grocery store. It used to make me just want to scream. It would be everything I could do to get my crap together to get to the stupid grocery store, because grocery stores are terrible for grievers. And then I would get through the whole awful experience. I would get my 5 things, because for a long time, that's all the grocery shopping I did. I had a grocery angel that did all the rest. And then I would get to the checkout and the damn cashier wants to ask how I am.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, no, we need to stop that. That's not a transactional question. It's an emotional question. And you need to find a place where when the person asks you, you can tell them the truth. So give yourself permission, find a witness.
Beautiful. Okay. I've got 2. Yeah. Beautiful. Those
That's
are
all.
powerful.
Just start there and you'll
Start there.
just breathe. Just breathe. One breath at a time. You can do it.
Yeah.
We can do it.
Oh,
Right. Bless
that's
God.
gorgeous.
That was our mantra. I would look at my daughter all the time and be like, we can do hard things. She's like, yeah, we can do hard things. Okay.
Yeah.
One more breath
And
off.
I really love the permission piece because I like the saying feel it to heal it or name it to tame it. I love those. And I do think that they're really important. But the word permission is so much more powerful than feel it to heal it because it's not transactional. I like how you said that. It's more give yourself permission to fall apart, which
Yes.
is feel it to heal it, but in so much more of a messy, allowable way.
Yeah, because I think, the myth that we've been given is that like grief should be this tidy little thing that you do for your 3 to 5 days of bereavement leave, and then it's finished, and you have a
Yeah.
funeral or a celebration of life, and then it's done, and you just get back to life and everything's fine. That's complete baloney. And it's impossible. It's an inhuman ask because that's not how grief works. But that's what society tells us we're supposed to be able to pull off. So when we can't, we feel like there's something wrong with us, when really we're just human, having a normal human reaction to something horrifying.
Yeah.
And it's okay for it to feel horrifying and disorienting and confusing and like nothing makes sense anymore and you don't know what time it is or how to feed yourself or anything. That's what grief really looks like. So you have to give yourself permission for the fullness of all of it. Or you just, that's when we get stuck. We get stuck when we try and deny part of it. When we think
Mhm.
it's supposed to be done. And so I'm just going to stop doing it. I'm like, okay, well, you let me know how long that works for. Because
Mhm.
it literally makes us sick, right? I think that's how we ended up, well, all of these sort of feel it to heal it and all of those great sayings was because we know now all of that suppressed emotion makes our physical body sick. And I also knew that wasn't going to be my story. I wasn't going to be sick from this. I was going to allow it and let it go. And then I was going to be okay.
Mhm.
So that's the grievers, one breath at a time, really, one hard thing. And then your whole to-do list is just to breathe in those earliest days. That's it. That's the rule we made. We can do one hard thing and then we're just going to breathe. That's how we're going to get through it.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, for the
Okay.
people, I think the critical piece to understand is that idea that we have what we say and what we offer to do backwards. So what we say tends to be one of those old cliches, which then shuts down conversation because they're all awful. And we should just agree as a collective to never say them ever again. They're all awful. The subtext of them, if you think about them long enough, is all bad. It's all something to do with how uncomfortable as a supporter I am with your grief, and could you please stop it? That's basically the subtext of all of them. And I
Okay. Give me some examples.
mean, oh, he would want you to be happy.
Mm,
Well, he is dead, and you want me to be happy. This is actually all about you. It's not about him at all.
okay.
So the
Okay.
subtext is all about how uncomfortable I am and how I want
Mm,
to say something short and snappy and then never talk about this again. None of them. So how does that open a conversation? How does that build connection? He would want you to be happy.
yeah.
I can either start an argument with you about how that's baloney,
Yeah.
he doesn't have a vote anymore, and you're being
Yeah.
ridiculous, but I'm probably not going to do that because it's all I can do to breathe.
Right.
Or I just go, huh, okay, what you have told me is that you are not a safe place for me to grieve,
Right.
which may or may not have been your intention, but that's the result.
Mhm.
So all those cliches, we're not going to say those anymore. They're really
Right.
hard. And I know we want to say something. What we want to say is something open-ended. Because if our aim is to build connection, connection comes from communication. Communication comes from something open, not something closed. So
Mhm.
something honest from the heart, probably going to be a little bit vulnerable and uncomfortable and awkward because we're trying a new skill. We're awkward around grief anyways. Let's be honest.
Mhm.
We're all awkward. I'm awkward and I do this for a living. I like live, eat and breathe this 24/7 and I'm
Yeah.
awkward. So let's be awkward doing something that's not harmful, doing something different. It's going to feel awkward. It's okay. It's a new skill. It's supposed to feel awkward.
Right.
Open hearted, being honest about where you're at is really powerful. If you're uncomfortable, say, wow, I am so uncomfortable. I don't even know what to say because I know there is nothing that can make this better. I know there is
Mm,
going to fix this. And I care about you and I'm here and I'll walk beside you while we figure this out.
beautiful.
How different is that from he wants you to be happy? Can you
Mm-hmm.
a whole different thing? One is like, whoa, conversation over. And one is, wow, I don't really know how to do this either. And I love that you will like help me figure it out. Right now, I'm really confused about X, Y, or Z. Can you do some research about that and get back to me? Whatever it is, but it opens a space for you to then have a conversation. And what you say is going to be different than what I would say. What we say to each situation is going to be different. There is no one right thing. And I think if we can release that, then it reduces a whole bunch of the pressure. Because if we're trying to get the one right thing and we don't get
Mm-hmm.
it, then we're like, oh, we're frozen because we did it, we tried, we got it wrong, we saw the person withdraw, and now what do we do? Let's not try to get one
So,
because there isn't one.
right. So I'm curious about your thoughts on, so I've got cliches, I agree. Like I'm also thinking of like at least statements. I
Mhm.
really hate those as well. I think those are really close-minded,
Nope.
close-ended. But I'm curious about your thoughts on if there's anything you need or give me a call if there's anything I can do for you.
Eh,
Those, yeah, okay. So tell me why. I'm curious.
That's the other half. So what we say needs to be open and expansive.
Hmm.
This is where we have it backwards. Usually what we offer is open and expansive. And I bet for the majority of your listeners, they have offered that genuinely. They genuinely wanted to support the person. And they probably felt a little bit hurt when the person never asked them for anything.
Right.
I had people say to me, but you never asked me for help. And I say back to them, I couldn't. So when
Yeah.
you say something like, anything you need, give me a call. I am here for you. Just pick up the phone. I'll be there.
Right.
The grieving brain, that brain fog, does not allow the griever to conceptualize that 2 Tuesdays from now, they're going to need somebody to pick up the kids at school or take the dog.
Hmm.
or take out the garbage, or do the washing, or do the groceries, or any of the millions of things that grievers need help with.
Yeah.
They can't conceptualize that. And when I would have moments where I thought, oh my gosh, I need help with this thing, I couldn't remember who had made those beautiful open offers.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to pick up the phone to say, hey, are you one of those people that said anytime I could pick up the phone? Because what if they say no? I wasn't going to do that. And
Yeah.
you're an idiot because you can't remember anything.
Yeah.
So, what we need to be offering is so specific and tangible, and preferably something we're already doing. Because the other thing that happens for grievers is they feel like a burden. And because society has conditioned us to think that we're supposed to be over it already, we also feel like we're supposed to be able to do it all ourselves. And we're supposed to be being
Mm.
independent and strong and all of those awful things that people also say to us. Oh, you're so strong. Oh, don't ever say that again. Anyway,
Mm.
so the offer of support is where we get to offer something really simple. I'm going to the grocery store. Go stand in front of your fridge and tell me what's missing, and I'll bring it to you this afternoon. Is it milk?
Mm.
Is it bread? Do you need peanut butter? Is it eggs? Cheese? Veggies? What do you need? I'll bring it this
Yeah.
afternoon.
Amazing.
Right? That's specific. Go stand in front of your pantry. I'm going to the Home Depot to grab yard waste bags. Do you need some too? I'll bring them to you this afternoon.
Yeah. Okay. All
Right?
right. You
On
said
Thursday,
something.
out my garbage. Could I take out yours too? Because I bet you don't even know when it's Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something really beautiful that I'm trying to remember. In order to be open hearted, you need to offer specific instead of offering open hearted. Is
Mhm.
that what you were saying?
So we're going to speak open hearted.
Yes.
That's where it's open, open ended, open questions, all of those skills there. What
Mhm.
we offer has to be specific and tangible.
Beautiful. I love this.
We have
Okay.
to flip the paradigm, right? We have the paradigm backwards.
Yes.
We say something closed and offer something open. We need to do it the other way around.
Yeah. So if I was to simplify it here, Suzanne, would like, and this is really rudimentary. Instead of saying if you need anything at all, give me a call, you might say instead, and this is again really rudimentary, I'm going to give you a call on Tuesday to see how you're doing. Really
Yeah,
rudimentary, but
yeah.
the same thing flipped.
Okay. Is it okay if I give you a call on Tuesday and just check in and see how you're doing?
Is it okay? Beautiful.
Right? I do my grocery shopping on the weekends. Could I touch base with you before I go and just see if you need anything?
Ooh.
Right?
Ooh, so good.
You have to follow up, because the
Yeah.
other thing that happens is sometimes we offer something and then, because we're living busy, full lives, we forget. But the griever whose life is a post apocalyptic nightmare remembers, so doesn't do that thing. And then you've forgotten. And then now they're in a pickle. So you need to offer and follow through. So offer
Right.
like to do. If you hate cooking and shopping, don't offer to cook and shop. Offer to come and do the raking of the leaves or mow the lawn or whatever. There's a million things you could do. Everything you need, the griever needs too. So pick the things you like and offer those, and offer them repeatedly and for a long time. Like, I had
Yep.
someone do my grocery shopping for me for about a year and a half. It took that long until I was able to do a full grocery shop. I could buy the smoothie ingredients, which was the 5 things I would buy: bananas, spinach, blueberries, oat milk, chia, or flax seeds. I could buy those 5 things. That's all the grocery shopping I did for a year and a half.
Wow.
And I would phone her literally and say, there's no junk food in the house. And I can't even figure out what I want. Can you just do a junk food shop for us? And she would go bring us bags of junk food. Not
Yeah.
always, but every once in a while I'd be like, we don't have any junk food. Do you bring us
Yeah.
junk?
Wow.
Sorry, I've had the flu all weekend and my voice is starting to go. I'm going to take a big drink of water. But yeah,
Yeah.
specific and tangible means that the person has the ability to say yes or no. Because we can all do that. Yes or no. I can do that. If you're already doing it, then we don't feel like a burden. I'm picking my kids up at school. Do you want me to grab yours?
Hmm. Right.
I know it's your turn to be soccer mom. Can I slice up the oranges and bring them for you? Because slicing the oranges is a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Everything we're doing, the griever is trying to pull off as well. And some things they'll be doing fine, some things they'll be struggling. Offer what you love, offer something different, just keep offering. And be okay if they say no. Because in that moment, they might be all right. But that doesn't mean they're all right forever. It doesn't mean no forever. It just means no to that right now. So don't take that personally. That's not a no forever. That's not a you don't matter to me. That's not a I'm trying to do it all on my own. That's a no, right now I actually really want to be the soccer mom and cut the oranges. But next time, who knows? It's anybody's guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna let you take this sip of water. I'm thinking. So I'm running through these again here. So I've got written down, I've got the nix the cliches and the at least statements. All of those
All
just need
those.
to go. Um, uh, Drop the open-ended questions and instead specific, tangible, and ask for permission.
Hmm?
Offer them repeatedly. Am I
Yep.
missing any?
I don't think so. Do so. I mean, offer something you like to do because you're more likely to follow through.
Okay.
And
Okay. So
it's optional, right? We don't need to offer something that like is awful for us to do because you
right.
want to be offering with love and with the intention of connection and with compassion and with all that. So if you're offering something that you hate to do, don't do that to yourself.
Right.
We all have things we love to do. Offer that.
So what are your thoughts then on, someone just showing up with food or, people checking in, how have you been doing, quite often? How are you doing today? Quite often, or, sending something in the mail or something like that. What are your thoughts on kind of unsolicited check-ins and or stop-ins?
I think unsolicited stop-ins are horrifying
Okay.
on every
Yeah.
level. And that's maybe just for me. I don't have to think about that. No, for me, that's horrifying. Mostly because in especially that acute first sort of 6 to 9 months, if you're anything like me, your house looks like a tornado has been through recently. So, like to have someone knock on the door and be like, "Oh, could I come for tea?" Like, no, no. Make an appointment, show up when you made your appointment. That's what I would suggest. Unless
Mhm.
and you have a different relationship with each person. If it's the kind of friend that you had that relationship with beforehand,
Mhm.
then you would say to them, "Hey, I'd love to be able to just still keep popping over. Does that feel doable for you right now? Or would you rather I give you a call ahead of time and make sure you're okay for me to come over?"
Mm.
Right? We want to be griever centered, not
Yeah.
just barging around doing what we would do. Right? We need to be
Right.
checking in. Um, there's a whole bunch of issues around food. And I hate to break people's heart, but most people do not want your tuna casserole. And I know for so many of us, food is our love language. We want to cook for you. We want to make sure you're eating. We want to take care of you. I've never thrown away more food in my entire life than in the 2 or 3 months after Ben died because people kept bringing us food and we were barely eating. So if food is your love language, right? I had one friend who was a wonderful cook. She loved cooking. And I said to her, you know what? I need some. So we lived on DoorDash and Skip the Dishes, Uber Eats, right? For
Mhm.
a long time. People just kept giving us gift cards. That's how people took care of us. Many people. It was amazing. Um, and then I was like, I need some recipes that just feel like comfort food, like that. I recognize that my body goes, oh yeah, I know what this is. And so I reached out to this friend who was one of those people who had made that open-ended thing. And I was able to make the connection and be like, who could help me with this? Oh, this person could. And I reached out to her and I said, I have 3 recipes that freeze really well that I love. Could I just send you the recipes and could you just like make them magically appear? And she,
Nice.
because I knew she loved to cook and I knew she would really like doing that. So I didn't feel badly asking her and she had made that offer. Um, but food is really tricky. So you want to make sure that you're asking first.
Mm.
And that's another one. If you're doing it for, if you're cooking for your own family, hey, I'm making a lasagna this weekend. Do you guys like lasagna? I'm happy to make an extra one and bring it to you and you can throw it in the freezer.
Right.
Right? That's a whole different thing than knocking on the door unexpectedly with your lasagna. Can you feel how that's different?
I can.
Because one
Mhm.
is so intrusive and so invasive and so like pushy feeling, and the other is a compassionate offer that's beautiful.
Mm.
So unsolicited food, I'm a big no to unsolicited food. Most people don't
Mhm.
have a big deep freeze anymore, and the whole neighborhood's casseroles are not going to help. Um, Groceries, 100%. Grocery shopping, very difficult. Every time I see an abandoned cart, I know it's a griever who got activated at the grocery store. I just know it. I'm like, oh, someone's having a griefy moment. And they literally, I've talked to so many grievers that have literally run crying from the grocery store. It's really hard. So grief groceries, if you love to grocery shop, get their list, make it appear for them. That's beautiful. Um, I love unsolicited text messages.
Okay.
I think that gives us an ability to reach out without being invasive. Where there's something about a phone call, and maybe it's generational. I know for my kids' generation, they never phone. Like they wouldn't know what to do with a phone call, I don't think, unless they're at work. But um, even in my generation, I'm like, oh, someone's phoning me. Like that means you have to like make sentences, you have to sound articulate, you can't be sobbing all the time. Whereas a text message, you can just be like, you can send an emoji back. You can just
Mhm.
send back thanks. I got lots of unsolicited text messages. I still do sometimes, and I love them because we want to know that people remember too. I think the biggest misnomer or misunderstanding supporters have is that they don't want to remind the person and make them sad. I hear that all the time. Oh, but I don't want to remind them and make them sad. You are not going to remind them. They remember.
They know. Yeah.
I knew every second of every day that Ben died at the end of September of 2020. I will never forget. I know.
Mhm.
The fact that you remember too is a gift
Right.
because for most of the time, in most areas of my life, people behave like nothing unusual happened then.
Hmm.
So,
Right. As to not offend you or hurt you.
because I saw X, Y, or Z, it made me think of him, or I heard this funny joke, or I saw this thing he would love or hate. That's a gift to me. And whether it makes me sad or not doesn't matter. Emotions are all good.
Right.
So, why we're worried about making people sad when they probably are already sad?
Hmm.
What they need is witnessing. What they need is connection.
Yeah.
And that we can do with an unsolicited thinking of you. That's it. That's all you need. Thinking of you. If you share a memory, even better. If you share
Yeah.
something that made you think of them, even better. But even just thinking of you, hoping you're,
Hmm. I love that.
is this a good time for
And
a call? Like if you're a phoner, is this a good time for a call? And you can have those shared agreements, right? You can say up front, hey, I would love to be able to give you a phone call, as you were suggesting, right? I would love to be able to give you a phone call every once in a while. Would that be okay with you?
yeah.
If they say yes or no, great. And if they say yes or no, offer again 6 months later, check in again. I still really miss talking with you. I'd love to be a place where you can just talk about what's true for you. You don't have to put on a face for me.
Hmm.
Would that be okay? Would that help you?
Right.
Right? We're just asking. We need to be asking more because we're pretending we know what we're doing when in fact we're terrified and we don't. And just ask. And then we have these amazing relationships and these amazing conversations and this amazing connection with people. And right now we're in an epidemic of loneliness in the most fractured
Absolutely.
time I've ever lived through. And what we need is connection. Well, let's ask. What do you need?
Mm.
I think
Yeah.
that it would be really helpful for someone to bring groceries. I'm going tomorrow. Do you need anything?
Yeah.
Right? Would this be helpful for you? Somebody I was talking to, this is, oh my gosh, probably 2 years ago now. She had some angel in her neighborhood come and do the laundry. She would come on Wednesdays, pick up all the laundry, and bring it back done on Thursdays. I was like, what? That is magical. I have to ask my daughter what we did because I don't actually remember. And we decided our remembrance was that we actually just bought more underwear and socks because we all have more clothes than we need. We just bought more socks and underwear so we didn't have to deal with laundry. But that, like to have someone who came in and took the baskets and brought it back clean, amazing. Whatever you
Right.
offer that.
I'm thinking about any situation. I'm really finding that this is spilling over into the new mother who just had a baby. It's spilling over into the woman who was just diagnosed.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I'm seeing it because I'm really seeing my own story and
Yeah.
my own text messages that really mattered, or the experiences that I gained. And I'm really seeing my own story in it as well. And so I think that this is such a beautiful episode for anybody who wants to support anybody. It's not just grief. It's truly, how can we support the people we love? Because it's so true. The time that um for example, someone messaged me and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Absolutely no pressure to answer me because I know you're going through a lot. I just want you to know you're loved."
Yeah.
That was so impactful
Mhm.
compared to, "Hey, how you doing?" You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And that's that from the heart, honest and
yeah,
vulnerable. Just thinking about you, like hoping everything is going okay. I know you're like, no need to reply. Those are I mean, if you already have that agreement, great. But if you don't put that in, no need to reply. Just thinking of you. Wanted you to know. Sending you loads of love.
yeah,
Just breathe. Whatever it is. But it
yeah.
can be 2 or 3 words. It doesn't have to be an essay. It's a text message, right? Pretend it's old Twitter where you only had 144 characters. It doesn't need to be long. It's just that little bit of outreach. It makes all the difference because then we're not alone. Because so much about grief is lonely.
And you hate you're strong. Is there something that people can say that uplifts you but isn't you are strong? Because I agree that's cliche.
I think, your strong is so interesting because when what you really, really want is support,
Mm,
and people keep telling you you're strong, it makes it seem like you don't need support.
right.
Because if you're strong, you don't need support.
Mm,
So, as much as I knew it was intended to be a compliment and a like an admirable quality somehow, and it's also just so cliche. Like, I don't know what they really meant. I really admire how you're navigating this was probably close. Or, what you did today was amazing and I just wanted you to know.
mm.
Something like that.
Yep.
But there's something about, oh, you're so strong. Here's what it is. It's a distancing thing
Mm.
because it makes me sound different from you.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
That's the issue. The subtext is I could never do what you're doing,
Mm. Yeah.
which isn't true because we would all figure it out. We would all
Yes.
do something. Wouldn't necessarily be what I chose to do, but that's okay. It would be something. But there's something about, oh, you're so strong. That's just always made me feel like I didn't want to be strong, first of all. And I didn't think I was being particularly strong. Because strong, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of stuff with strong. It's a weird word.
Yeah. True.
I didn't necessarily want to be seen as strong because that meant you were supposed to figure it out all by yourself somehow in my brain.
Yeah.
But there was also that subtext to it that was about how they didn't think they would be strong, but that you were. Like there was something icky there, is why I don't like it. Because it's differentiating.
Right. Okay. I love that. I love that. And I really am grateful to you for all of your honesty, Suzanne, as you explain all of these different things that worked for you and didn't work for you. All the while knowing that, everybody's a little different and that there might be, for some people they may love you're strong, but
Yep.
I'm curious about going back to that honesty piece where, you might ask the person, "Hey, I really think you're really strong. How does that feel for you?"
Mhm.
That might be another thing you could say to see, like, they might be like, "Actually, you know what? I really love that. Thank you." Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Like, does that feel like a compliment? It's a
Yeah,
great.
does that feel like a compliment to you because it's how I feel, you know? Is that something that you're comfortable hearing from me?
Yeah, whatever it is, but we can have that curiosity about how things land instead. And I think, it's interesting when we were talking about how I do it now, when I need to say something or I need to comment on someone's post or, people reach out to me often and say, oh my gosh, my friend just experienced this thing. What do I do? Or they reach out because they've experienced something. The first thing I do is I stop because I know if I go fast, it's going to be a cliche esque. Even though I don't ever use those words, it's going to have that flavor. So I
Mm.
stop and I go, okay, so what is this person doing? What do I really think about that? What is my wish for them? And then I write that.
Mm. Let's reiterate that again. So what are they doing? What do I wish for them? And that's what you write.
Yeah. Like someone posted the other day that they were going to a funeral. Here's a perfect example. Social media post. They were off to go to a funeral and they wrote a little bit about the funeral. And they got lots of replies. So amazing. Lots of community being, lots of connection and support, all of those things. And so many of them, I'm sure, were the exact thing that that person writes on every griefy, bereavement-y post that they see.
Yeah.
Sending love, hugs, thinking of you, hope it goes okay, something or other. It's a very short thing. And I thought, okay, what is my wish for this? And it was a big, long post about what they were doing. And I thought, no, what I'm wishing for them is like that there's some peace and it feels like there's a lot of love and connection. And that's what I wrote. I wrote, oh, I'm so thrilled that you're able to go and be with your whole family. I hope it's a beautiful time of remembrance and peace and love. Because I'm going to
Love that.
do something different every time. But if I just looked at it and went, oh, it's bereavement, blah, blah, sending love, hope you're okay. Like, of course we,
Hugs. Yeah.
because we get scared and then our heart rate goes and then we're like, I have to say something. It's Facebook. Nobody's watching what time it is or how long it takes you to post something back. Take a breath, make an intention, write from there. That completely changes what you write.
Yeah.
But we have to slow ourselves down. We have to get out of our fight or flight or freeze or fawn, right? Because that's what's happened, right? Our nervous system has gone, wah! And then we're writing from there. We can't write from there and build connection and compassion and all the things that we want. I don't think it's possible. So we have to sit down and go, what do I really mean for this person? What am I saying specifically to this person in this situation? Oh, I'm glad you get to go. I'm glad the whole family will be there. And I hope it's a beautiful sharing. It was an elder person who had died and lived a long, beautiful life. I'm hoping it's a beautiful time of community and remembrance and love,
Yeah.
right?
Coming from your heart to this person. Yeah. Wow. Well, that is wonderful advice for the person because I'm kind of thinking, and the reason I think I'm grilling you so much is because I'm kind of thinking you hear this a lot. What should we say to cancer survivors, or in your case, grieving mothers?
Yeah.
What should we say? And you might say a thing or two, but this is a really broken down version of what's good, what's not. Like, I'm sure that anybody listening is probably writing notes because I know I am. And how can we be better friends, family, and all of these sorts of things. And so thank you so much for really giving us the nitty gritty of what it is to be a supporter. So what are you doing now in your business? And how have you moved, shifted? I know now you're working with more victims of grief as well. So where are you sitting now, going forward?
So now I have a three-pronged system. I'm a lover of threes. So I have a three-pronged system. So I do work with grievers with the conscious and curious grieving idea and really helping them to just find their own path because it's going to be different for each of us. But how do we stay conscious and curious about what's possible, what's next, what's right, what's happening right now? And then I work with leaders, so official leaders, de facto leaders, leaders of communities, organizations, whatever, to have grief-informed leadership. So to really understand grief and how it impacts people. And then how can we as leaders in communities really step up to be that source of connection that keeps people attached? Because we want to help people stay attached to their social circles and their communities because we hope to lessen the change of their address book. So that's prong two. And then prong three is I will go into organizations, into companies or other organizations and do sort of a top to bottom grief makeover, if you will, and just really make them grief resilient. So that looks at, leadership, emotional intelligence. We have to start there, right? Because the leaders have to lead the way in organizations because no one will be more vulnerable and honest than their leader because it's not safe. So how are the leaders showing up? How are they with their emotional intelligence, with their connection to their own emotions? And then looking systemically at how do we shift conversations or start conversations in most cases that allow emotional words to be used, for example, when we're talking, to acknowledge that when things go wrong, we have feelings about it. And then really starting to shift that culture so that when grievers come back from their woefully short 3 to 5 days, they're coming to a space that is a little bit prepared for them, where there's a policy in place. So that poor supervisor that has to have that first awkward conversation has a scaffold to use to say, hey, this is the policy we've developed. Here's the supports that are available to you, and really breaks down to help mitigate all of the symptoms the griever is having that show up at work because the person is there. How do we mitigate those, and what scaffolding can we put around them so they're less impactful on their ability to fully participate in the workplace? So that's sort of the 3 prongs. And then I do lots of speaking, and anywhere people will have me come and do usually a combination of what we've done today, right? A little bit of Grief 101, how does it really work? A little bit of what can I say, a little bit about what can I do, and then sometimes specifically on what might be impacting your organization or your group. And just opening up those conversations. We just need to break this, logjam of silence and fear that we have. We have to break it up. It's past time. So everything I can do to break that up is great. And then for grievers, I do a free grief cafe through Meetup, which has actually turned out to be a really lovely space. We get together twice a month on Zoom. It's on a drop-in basis. And so people, because I know it's grievers, people sign up and they don't show up, which is fine. I always say to everyone, sign up, so I know that you're at least thinking about coming. And then if you don't make it on the day because something that seemed like a good idea Tuesday morning is a terrible idea by Wednesday night when we get together, that's fine. That's how grief works. But it's become a lovely space for people to come together from all over North America. We've had so far. Have we had anyone from outside North America? I'm not sure. But we've had all over North America come together with all different kinds of losses, from pet loss to job loss to significant other loss to like a whole bunch of losses all packed together. And just share, like, how are you doing this week? What's up for you? What are you struggling with? What are you curious about? And we just have a really rich conversation. So it's been really amazing to just find spaces to keep having these conversations. Speak at conferences, have grief cafes, do podcasts.
Extraordinary, extraordinary. And do I have all those links that I can link?
Have them all. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Linktree has
Great.
them all. I usually just give everyone my Linktree because then when I update it, everything stays accurate. But it's got the Grief Cafe link on there to sign up on Meetup, and a link to my website. You can get on my calendar. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's great. I'm so glad that I have all those links. I will absolutely link them, and or the link tree rather, and so that everyone can see how they can connect with you as either a griever or a supporter of a griever, as well as businesses, companies, and speaking. So I'm really looking forward to adding that. And I'm so grateful for you today to share your story, because it is a really powerful and really difficult story to share. You've made it into something so beautiful that is helping so many people. So well done there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.